time for a review on solving quadratic equations by factoring. So to factor an equation is to break it back down into its factors, hence factoring. How do you find its factors? Well, you have to think and remember back to how FOIL works. Remember, the F in FOIL stands for the first times the first. So I know that the first spot in my first parenthesis times the first spot in my second parenthesis have to give me this first term. Okay, the only way to get x squared is to have x times x. So now we're going to jump to the L in FOIL. The L in FOIL stands for the last term times the last term. And the last term here times the last term here has to give you the last term in your trinomial equation. So we know that the last number is 12. So if I try to break down 12, here are my options. It's 1 times 12, it's 2 times 6, and it's 3 times 4. So I have 3 options. How do I know which option to choose? Okay, now that middle number comes into play. And again, the middle in FOIL stands for the outsides. The outsides is this product here. It's the first term and the first factor, and the last term and the outside, and the second factor. So these are my outsides. I'm going to actually put those in blue. Let's do that. There's my outsides. Okay, the I in FOIL stands for multiplying the insides, which are these. So my outsides plus my insides together, if I add these guys up, I need to get 8. So now I can go through my list over here and say, well, I can either add or subtract these numbers. If I add 1 and 12, I get 13. If I subtract 1 and 12, I get 11. That's out. I, again, am looking for the 8. So 2, I can either add or subtract. If I add 2 plus 6, ding, 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 I have a winner. And let's just be thorough. If I add 3 and 4, I get 7. If I subtract 3 and 4, I get 1. That's out. So we're thinking this has to be the 2 and the 6. Now look at what they have in common. Okay, or look at the patterns here. The 2 times the 6 gets me the 12, but the 2 plus the 6 gets me the 8. Okay, now it's all about signs. Because this number right here is a plus sign, I know that these two signs have to either both be negatives or both be positives. In this case, because my middle sign is also positive, they will both be positives. Now I haven't solved anything yet. All I have done is I've factored it. So now I must set each factor equal to 0 and solve each factor separately. Okay, solving the first equation, I get x equals -2. Solving the second equation, I get x equals -6. There are my solutions. Okay, so first example, leading coefficient was 1. Not so bad, but we all know it's never that easy, right? Leading coefficient's not 1, and now all of a sudden, everybody wants to just write down IDK and maybe a frowny face, and they skip it and cut their losses. Okay, let's look for something better than that. That's not our best option. So what do? Okay, I have to start the same way. I have to think, well, what would FOIL tell me? How did this 6x squared minus 5x minus 4 get put together? Now, I am not a big factor box or mailbox or factor fish or diamond person. I really think about the FOIL. So every time I do this, I'm going to think, how do I get this first term of 6x squared? Well, I get it from multiplying this by this. Now I have a couple options, but I'm going to go with what I think is the most common option, which is going to be the 2 and the 3. Okay, if that doesn't work, maybe I need to replace it with 6 and 1. But I'm banking on the fact that I think 2 and 3 should work. Okay, to get the 4 here at the end, again, I have some options. So I think the 2 and the 2 are going to be my most common option. But if those don't work, I can try the 1 and the 4, and I can try the 4 and the 1. Okay, because my two factors are not the same here, they have different numbers in front, these two options have to both be considered. So let's try to think about this. Outsides times the insides. So if I use the first option, if I use this first row, okay, my outsides give me a product of 2 times 2, which is 4. My insides give me a product of 2 times 3. So again, it's this 2 right here and this 3 right there, which gives me 6. If I add or subtract those, I'm looking to try to get a 5. If I add them, I get 10. If I subtract them, the difference is 2. Okay? I'm not going to be able to get that 5. So that tells me option 1 is out. So option 2, what happens now? When I multiply my outsides, it's this 2 times this 4, which gives me 8. If I multiply my insides, it's this 1 times this 3, which gives me 3. Okay, I have a choice to add or subtract them. I'll figure that part out later. But if I subtract them, I can get 5. Ding, ding, ding. I've got a winner. Okay, let me just look and see what happens when I try the last row. So just to be thorough, okay, the last row says my outsides would be this 2 times this 1. So my outsides would give me a product of 2, and then my insides would be this 4 times this 3, and that would give me 12. Okay, if I add or subtract them, I'm looking for 5, and that's just not going to happen. So we already knew the numbers are going to be 1 and 4. Now I have to play with my signs. I know that I'm going to need one positive number and one negative number. I need the difference between 8 and 3 to be 5. I don't want them both to be positive or both to be negative because then they give me 11. So one positive, one negative. How do I know which one's which? Well, again, I look over here and I see a negative 5. That tells me the only way to get negative 5 is I'm going to want a negative 8 and a positive 3. Those will add up and give me the negative 5. So the negative 8 puts my negative there. The positive 3 goes there. And now I know my two factors. Again, factoring and solving are not the same. Okay, I need to factor to help me solve. So now I can set each factor, and I'm going to cram it in down here, set each factor equal to 0. And probably up front I should have said you cannot factor if you don't have the big equal 0 in the original problem. Okay, if it doesn't say equal 0, you must get this to equal 0 first. And now we're going to solve each factor. Subtract the 1, divide by 2, and I get a negative 1/2. And the second factor, add the 4 and divide by 3. So there are my two solutions.